She got into the wrong car on Christmas Eve. The Korean Mafia Boss locked the doors and said, "You're not leaving, little lawyer." Sheila White climbed into the black Mercedes at 11:52 p.m. on Christmas Eve, wearing last year's red dress and heels she'd resold twice because junior associates don't buy new shoes. In exactly 2 minutes, bullets would spray the windshield. In exactly 45 minutes, she would be standing in a penthouse suite 47 floors above the city, staring at bulletproof glass and wondering if she'd ever see her apartment again. But she didn't know any of that yet. Right now, she was standing outside Miller & Strauss LLP on a frozen Manhattan sidewalk, watching her Uber app refresh. No drivers available. The street was empty except for falling snow and the distant sound of Christmas music from a bar she'd never been invited into. Before we continue, if you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button right now. Your subscription is what allows us to keep bringing you intense stories like this one. We upload new stories like this every day, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Sheila discovers Lee's real identity. Subscribe now so you never miss an upload. Let's dive in. God, I hate Christmas, she thought, her breath fogging in the air. Not the decorations or the carols, or even the forced office party where partners clinked champagne glasses while she filed briefs in the copy room. It was the way the holiday exposed exactly how replaceable she was. The senior partners were in Aspen. Her parents hadn't called. Her phone had 0 texts waiting, just another Christmas Eve working late while everyone else had somewhere to be. Some people mattered enough to remember. Some people were ambient office furniture that happened to have a law degree. The Christmas Eve associate meeting had been exactly what she'd expected. 2 hours discussing cases she'd never touch, surrounded by third years who talked over her like she was a paralegal. She'd slipped out the moment they moved to the partners' lounge for eggnog she wasn't important enough to drink. The cold hit like a verdict she couldn't appeal. December in Manhattan was magical if you belonged to someone, but Sheila belonged to a firm that billed her at $450 an hour and paid her like she should be grateful for the opportunity. Her phone showed 4% battery. The Uber app timed out. A black Mercedes with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, and relief flooded through her frozen body. She didn't check the license plate. She didn't see the neck tattoos yet. She just opened the door and climbed in, grateful someone had finally arrived for her. Sheila's phone died somewhere between the hospital and hypothermia. $23 left in her account. No way to call another ride. So when the black Mercedes pulled up exactly where her Uber app said it would, she didn't question it. She just yanked open the door and collapsed into leather that probably cost more than her rent. Thank God. I've been waiting forever, and... The driver turned around. Neck tattoos, the kind that crept up from his collar like dark vines, disappearing into his hairline. His knuckles, draped over the steering wheel, spelled out WRNG, DNG in crude blue ink across 8 fingers. "You're not my Uber driver." Lee Tae-jin's expression didn't change. No. She should have run. Would have, if her fingers weren't numb and her scrubs weren't still damp with Mrs. Patterson's blood and her brain wasn't running on 47 hours without sleep. "I'm so sorry, I thought..." The window beside her head exploded. Lee's hand shot out, slamming her down into the seat as the Mercedes lurched forward. More gunfire. The rear window spiderwebbed, then shattered completely. Cold air screamed through the car. Sheila couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only press herself into expensive leather while the city blurred past in streaks of red and white. "Stay down!" Lee's voice was eerily calm as he whipped the car through a red light, narrowly missing a delivery truck. "The Huangs are very excitable." "The who?" "People who want me dead." He took a corner so sharp she slammed against the door. "Now they think you're with me, which means they want you dead too." The chase ended at a building so tall Sheila couldn't see the top through the snow. Lee dragged her into a private elevator, his palm flat against a scanner. The doors closed on shouting voices and running footsteps. 47 floors up, all glass and steel, the kind of view that cost more per month than she made in a year. "The Huangs think you're mine now," Lee said, pouring himself a drink like he hadn't just been shot at. "That makes you dead if you leave." Sheila laughed. Actually laughed, because what else was there to do? "You're kidnapping me, on Christmas Eve. I'm saving your life. By holding me hostage?" Before he could answer, the elevator chimed. A tiny woman burst out carrying enough food containers to feed an army, talking rapid-fire Korean. She stopped when she saw Sheila, and her entire face lit up. "Finally!" She grabbed Sheila's face between her hands. "A Korean daughter. I told him, I said, Taejin, you need to settle down." "I'm not Korean," Sheila managed, "and I'm definitely not his girlfriend. Yet." The woman, Lee's mother apparently, started unpacking food. "You'll see. My son, he's a good boy." Lee looked like he wanted to die. Sheila waited until 2 a.m., hacked the smart elevator panel using a trick she'd learned from a patient's teenage son. Almost had it too. Then Lee's hand appeared over her shoulder, pressing his palm to the scanner. The screen went dark. "Cute," he said. "But you'll need my palm print." The hanbok arrived on a silk-draped hanger, crimson fabric shimmering like spilled wine. Mi-sun stood in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a woman who'd negotiated hostile corporate takeovers before breakfast. "Family dinner," she said. "You wear this." Sheila clutched her borrowed jeans. "I'm not family." "You're here. That makes you family." Mi-sun's tone allowed no argument. "Besides, red is your color." 2 hours later, Sheila descended the stairs, the hanbok's weight foreign against her skin. The fabric whispered secrets with each step, centuries of tradition wrapped around a woman who'd spent her life in courtroom pencil skirts. Lee waited at the bottom, and the air changed when he saw her. He wore traditional Korean attire, black silk embroidered with gold thread that caught the light like scattered coins. But it was his expression that stopped her mid-step, not the predator. Not the crime lord. Something quieter. Something that made her throat tight. "Red suits you, little lawyer." The dinner table stretched long enough to seat 12. Lee's inner circle filled the chairs, men whose faces she'd memorized from police files, women whose elegant silk hid dangerous minds. But it was Mi-sun at the head of the table who commanded the room, serving her son with hands that had probably held both babies and boardroom gavels. Sheila watched Lee with his mother, watched him laugh at her scolding about eating too fast, watched him pour her tea with a gentleness that contradicted every violent file she'd read about him. For one disorienting moment, he was just a son, just human. It made everything worse. At 2 a.m., she knotted bed sheets with lawyer's precision. The balcony drop was 20 feet per floor, 45 feet to freedom. The night air bit cold against her face as she lowered herself down, fabric burning against her palms. 3 floors down, strong hands grabbed her waist. Lee hauled her up like she weighed nothing, bed sheets dangling uselessly below. His face was stone-cold fury. "You'll break your neck before the Huangs break the rest of you." He carried her inside, and she hated that she noticed the way his heartbeat thundered against her cheek, hated more that it matched her own. He sat her on the bathroom counter, running warm water over her rope-burned hands with surprising gentleness. His laptop sat open on the side table, security footage showing dark sedans circling the building like sharks. The Huang family crest visible even in grainy night vision. Lee's fingers stilled on her wrists. When he looked up, his eyes held something that might have been regret in a different man. "You're mine to protect now." His thumb brushed her pulse point. "Accept it." Outside, the sedans continued their endless loop. Inside, Sheila's hands burned where he'd touched them, and she couldn't tell anymore which danger was worse, the one hunting her or the one holding her. Lee hadn't slept in 48 hours. The glow of his laptop cast shadows across his face as he hunched over the dining table, 3 international contracts spread before him like battle plans. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. Sheila emerged from her room at dawn, finding him muttering in Korean, fingers pressed against his temples. She paused, remembering similar scenes from the firm, partners drowning in details they couldn't quite see through exhaustion. "You missed the arbitration clause in Section 7, she said quietly, leaning over his shoulder. "It defaults to Chinese jurisdiction. With your sole headquarters, you'll lose automatic appeal rights." Lee's head snapped up. "What?" She pointed to the dense paragraph buried in legal jargon. "And here, the force majeure exemptions. They're written to exclude acts of God but not government intervention. If Beijing changes import regulations, your supplier walks penalty-free while you're contracted to deliver. You'll hemorrhage millions covering the gap." He stared at her, then at the contract, then back at her. "How did you—" "Third contract's worse." She reached across him, flipping pages. "Your intellectual property protections have a 12-month sunset clause. After a year, your manufacturing partner can replicate your designs legally. Did Miller & Strauss draft these?" "Their merger and acquisition team." Lee's voice had gone flat. "Top-rated." "Top-rated at billing hours." Sheila pulled out a chair, sitting beside him. "May I?" For the next 3 hours, she rewrote all 3 contracts while he watched in silence. Her fingers flew across his laptop, restructuring clauses, closing loopholes, building protections his expensive lawyers had missed. When she finally pushed the computer back to him, the morning sun was streaming through the windows. Lee scrolled through her changes, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the laptop carefully, as if handling something precious. "You're wasted at Miller & Strauss." His voice was quiet but certain. "What do they pay you?" "Lee." "I'll triple it. Name your price." The offer hung between them, tempting and terrifying. Before Sheila could respond, Mi-sun appeared in the doorway, announcing breakfast with pointed looks at her son's exhausted face. The kitchen became Sheila's unexpected sanctuary. Mi-sun taught her to fold mandu dumplings with the precision of origami, her weathered hands guiding Sheila's uncertain ones. They communicated more in gesture than words, but somehow Sheila understood everything. The way to test oil temperature with a wooden chopstick, how to know when rice was perfect by sound alone. "He looks at you the way his father looked at me," Mi-sun said one afternoon, in careful English. "Like you are the answer to a question he forgot he asked." That evening, Lee appeared in her doorway holding a sleek silver laptop. "If you're stuck here," he said, meeting her eyes, "you should work." Sheila took it, her throat tight. For the first time since signing that contract, trapped didn't feel like the right word anymore. She felt something far more dangerous. She felt safe. The bathroom door wasn't locked. That was her first mistake. Sheila pushed it open, towel in hand, and froze. Lee stood there, water still streaming down his back, turning to grab his own towel from the rack. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. The neck tattoo she'd glimpsed before wasn't subtle. It was a masterpiece. A Korean dragon coiled from his shoulder blade up to his jawline, scales rendered in such detail they seemed to shimmer in the steam. But it was his torso that stole her breath. A phoenix spread its wings across his chest, flames licking toward his ribs where Korean characters ran in vertical lines down his side. More ink wrapped around his biceps, disappearing and reappearing like secrets written on skin. He was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "See something you like, little lawyer?" His voice cut through the steam, lazy and amused. Sheila's face burned hotter than the shower had been. She stumbled backward, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed her back to the hallway wall, eyes squeezed shut against the image now burned into her brain. Professional. She needed to stay professional. 2 hours later, she opened the closet in her room to hang up her work blazer and stopped dead. Designer clothes hung where empty space had been that morning. Silk blouses, tailored pants, a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, all in her size. She found Lee in his office, door open, tie loosened as he reviewed contracts. "How do you know my measurements?" The question came out sharper than intended. He didn't look up from his paperwork. "Size 6 dress, size 7 shoes." His pen moved across the document, signing something with fluid strokes. "You bite your lip when you're thinking, touch your collarbone when you're nervous, and you were wearing the same rotation of 4 outfits. I fixed the problem." That's... She searched for the word. Invasive? Thoughtful? Completely inappropriate? "You can't just..." "I notice everything about you, Sheila." He finally looked up, and something in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "Everything." She fled before he could see the effect those words had. The next morning, a black box sat on her dresser. Expensive wrapping, no tag needed. Inside, tissue paper revealed silk and lace, lingerie in midnight blue that somehow matched the dress he'd hung in her closet. The note was written in his precise handwriting. "Since you noticed me noticing." Sheila sat on the edge of the bed, the silk slipping between her fingers like water. Every interaction felt like a game she didn't know the rules to, each move calculated to destabilize her further. The bathroom, the clothes, now this. The worst part? Her hands were shaking, but not from anger. The apartment was silent at 2 a.m., the kind of silence that amplifies every thought you're trying to escape. Sheila had given up on sleep an hour ago, her mind replaying every moment with Lee like a song stuck on repeat. She padded toward the kitchen in bare feet, then stopped short in the doorway. Lee stood at the stove, his back to her, stirring something that smelled like comfort and late-night confessions. He didn't turn around, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. "Couldn't sleep either?" "How did you know it was me?" "Your footsteps are lighter than Chan Woo's, and you pause before entering rooms, like you're still asking permission." He glanced over his shoulder, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Ramyun?" She nodded, moving to sit at the counter. The domestic simplicity of it felt dangerously intimate, more intimate than all their charged conversations combined. Lee worked with practiced efficiency, cracking eggs into the bubbling broth, his movements economical and sure. "You cook like someone who's spent a lot of nights alone," Sheila said softly. "Perceptive, little lawyer." He set a bowl in front of her, then took the seat beside her instead of across, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Some appetites are easier to satisfy than others." They ate in silence for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. "I want to kiss you, little lawyer." The words hung in the air between them. Sheila's chopsticks stilled halfway to her mouth. She set them down carefully, turned to face him fully. His dark eyes were on her, intense and unwavering. "Then kiss me." Lee reached out, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with everything she knew about him. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she leaned into the touch before she could stop herself. He moved closer, close enough that she could count his eyelashes, feel his breath against her lips. Then he stopped, inches away. So close and impossibly far. "Not until you're free to choose it," he said, his voice rough with restraint. "Not while you're here because you have to be." "What if I'm choosing it now?" The words came out barely above a whisper. His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might break. But he pulled back slowly, his hand dropping from her face, leaving her skin cold where his warmth had been. Ask me again when the doors are unlocked. Sheila sat there, watching him stand and walk away, his untouched ramyun cooling on the counter. And somewhere between the wanting and the waiting, between his restraint and her surrender, she realized with startling clarity that she had completely fallen for him. The most dangerous thing about Lee Tae-min wasn't his darkness. It was how desperately she wanted to be the light he'd let in. Min-ji Hwang entered the penthouse like she owned it, which in her mind, she probably did. Security had let her through without so much as a phone call. Someone on Lee's payroll had clearly been bought. She moved through the space with practiced elegance, her Chanel suit pristine, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her more beautiful and more terrifying at the same time. "Father gave you 7 days, Lee," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. Her English was perfect, her accent barely there. "Marry me or Koreatown burns. We're on day 6 in case you've lost count." Sheila looked up from the contracts she'd been reviewing at the dining table. Minji's gaze swept over her with the kind of dismissive appraisal reserved for things beneath notice. "Who's this? Your American pet project?" "I'm his lawyer," Sheila said evenly, though her grip tightened on her pen. Minji laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "A lawyer? How quaint." She turned back to Lee, who had emerged from his study, his face carved from stone. "Is she worth your mother's life? Because that's who father will start with. He's already had people watching her building in Busan." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Lee crossed the room in 3 strides, gripped Minji's arm, and steered her toward the door with barely controlled violence. "Get out! Tell your father I'll burn before I marry you." "You'll burn anyway," Minji said pleasantly, but she went, leaving behind only the scent of expensive perfume and implicit death threats. The door closed. Silence pressed down like a weight. "Why don't you just marry her?" Sheila heard herself say, her voice strange in her own ears. "End this." Lee turned slowly. "What?" "Your mother, your businesses, everyone you employ, just..." The words felt like they were being dragged out of her. "Just marry her and make it stop. Because I'd rather burn my empire than spend 1 day with her." Something snapped in Sheila. She was on her feet, crossing the room, and her hand connected with his face before she'd consciously decided to move. The crack of the slap echoed in the cavernous space. "You selfish bastard. Your mother could die because of your pride. Because you..." He kissed her. Not gentle, not asking permission, desperate and claiming and real in a way that stole the breath from her lungs. His hands framed her face like she was something precious and breakable and necessary all at once. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, his breathing ragged. "I'll learn to burn the world down for you if you let me," he whispered. "But I won't marry her. I can't. Not when it's you, He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Sheila could feel the confession in the way his hands trembled against her skin, in the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been afraid to ask. Sheila stared at the ceiling of Lee's guest room, her fingers still tingling from where they'd touched his jaw hours earlier. Sleep was impossible. The kiss had cracked something open inside her, something she'd kept locked down since the day Marcus had shattered her world. She gave up at 3 a.m. and padded to Lee's office, where boxes of Huang Syndicate documents sat waiting. If she couldn't turn off her mind, she might as well make it useful. The first hour was tedious. Shell company registrations, property deeds, tax forms that all seemed legitimate on the surface. But Sheila had spent years analyzing financial patterns for wealthy clients who thought their money made them untouchable. She knew how to spot what didn't belong. There, a real estate purchase for $12 million, notarized by someone named Park Ji-hoon. She cross-referenced the date with public records. Park Ji-hoon had been dead for 3 years when he supposedly notarized that document. Her pulse quickened. She pulled more deeds, more shell companies. Dead notaries appeared again and again, their signatures authorizing transactions years after their deaths. The properties were always in Koreatown, always purchased through maze-like corporate structures designed to hide the real buyers. She grabbed Lee's laptop and started mapping the connections, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Shell company to shell company to shell company, all leading back to a single source. Hwang Industries. And the amounts were staggering. 47 properties in 18 months. When she tallied the total, her breath caught. $847 million laundered through fake property transactions. She ran to Lee's bedroom and hammered on the door. "Lee, wake up! I'm about to hand you the Hwang's entire empire." He appeared in seconds, hair disheveled, eyes alert despite the hour. She thrust her laptop at him, explaining the pattern she'd found, the dead notaries, the shell companies, the sheer scale of the operation. Lee's expression shifted as he scrolled through her work, from confusion to disbelief to something that looked dangerously like hope. "You just saved Koreatown," he said quietly. "With this, we can shut them down completely." From the hallway, Mi-sun's voice drifted in. "She's making you hope again." The older woman stood in shadow, watching them. "Be careful, Leah. Hope makes men careless." But Sheila barely heard her. She was staring at one final document she'd pulled, her triumph curdling into ice. The evidence was perfect, too perfect, and buried in the corporate structures, hidden behind layers of legal protection, were transaction approvals that required someone with access to City Hall zoning records. Someone like Lee. If she handed this evidence to the authorities, it wouldn't just implicate the Hwangs. The paper trail could destroy Lee too. Sheila stared at Lee across the breakfast table, her coffee untouched. "I need to go to the FBI today." He didn't flinch, didn't argue, just set down his newspaper and met her eyes with that infuriating calm. "All right. That's it? Just all right?" "You were always free to leave, Sheila." He stood, walked to his desk, and returned with car keys, his personal phone, and a thick envelope. "Take my driver. He knows the city. There's $20,000 cash, enough to disappear if that's what you want. New identity, new life. I'd never find you." Her hands trembled as she took the items. "You're just letting me go?" "I'm giving you a choice. The only thing I've ever truly wanted from you." His voice dropped. "Come back if you want to. Don't if you don't." The FBI field office in downtown Seattle smelled like stale coffee and photocopier toner. Special Agent Kim was younger than Sheila expected, sharper too. She spread the documents across the conference table, her dark eyes scanning each page with practiced efficiency. "This is substantial evidence," Kim said finally. "Money laundering, securities fraud, bribery. The Hwang family is going down." She looked up. "But you understand this implicates Lee Young too. He's mentioned in at least 12 of these transactions." Sheila's throat tightened. The document sat between them like a test she hadn't studied for. One word from her and Lee would spend the next decade in federal prison. Justice served. The Hwangs punished. Everything she'd wanted. Her hand hovered over the pages. Then she pulled out a pen and began redacting. Black lines covered Lee's name, again and again, until he disappeared from the narrative entirely. "Just the Hwangs," she said. "He was trying to stop them." Kim studied her for a long moment. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure." The penthouse was dark when she returned, lit only by the city lights beyond the windows. Lee stood at the glass, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. He turned when he heard her footsteps. You came back. I want to spend New Year's Eve with you." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, wonder, something raw and unguarded she'd never seen before. "I unlocked all the doors when you left. The elevator, the apartment, everything. You chose this. You chose me." Sheila crossed the distance between them, her heart pounding. "I chose you." His kiss was different this time. Not the controlled restraint of their wedding night, but something desperate and real. His hands tangled in her hair as he pulled her closer, and she felt the tremor in his fingers, the racing of his pulse against hers. "Sheila," he whispered against her lips. "My Sheila." She pulled him toward the bedroom, and this time there were no barriers between them. No contracts, no revenge plots, no lies. Just two people who'd walked through fire and chosen each other anyway. The penthouse glittered with paper lanterns and champagne flutes. Mi-sun had transformed the space into something magical, strings of lights casting warm shadows across faces Sheila had come to love. The Kim family filled every corner with laughter, their voices rising and falling like waves. Wait, one of Lee's cousins said, eyes wide. "You're telling me you showed up to Christmas with nothing?" Sheila raised her glass, grinning. "I don't have gifts. I was kidnapped." The room erupted. Even my son doubled over, clutching her sides. Lee wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close as the laughter rolled through the penthouse like thunder. The television murmured in the background, counting down to midnight. Sheila barely noticed when Lee's hand slipped from her waist. She was too busy arguing with his uncle about the finer points of contract law, her cheeks flushed with wine and joy. Then the room went quiet. She turned. Lee was on one knee, a small velvet box open in his palm. The ring inside caught the light, jade set in platinum, delicate and ancient. "My grandmother's ring," he said softly, his voice carried despite the hush. "Marry me, little lawyer." Sheila's breath caught. "I don't even know your real first name." "Lee J. Young." His eyes never left hers. "Now say yes." "Yes." The word came out broken, beautiful. "Yes, yes, yes." The room exploded into cheers as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, cool against her skin. Lee stood, catching her face between his hands, kissing her as champagne corks popped and his family shouted their approval. Then Mi-sun's voice cut through the celebration. "Everyone, look!" The television screen blazed with breaking news. Federal agents swarmed the Huang estate, their vans blocking every exit. The chyron scrolled across the bottom. FBI arrests Huang crime family in massive sting operation. And there was Min-ji, her perfect hair disheveled, her designer dress wrinkled as agents led her toward a waiting vehicle in handcuffs. She was screaming something, her face twisted with rage, but the sound was muted beneath the reporter's narration. Mi-sun moved to stand beside Sheila, her hand gentle on her shoulder. "Welcome home, daughter." Sheila leaned into the warmth of her future mother-in-law, Lee's arm solid around her waist. His grandmother's ring heavy with promise on her finger. Outside, fireworks began their ascent toward midnight, painting the sky in colors that looked like hope. 3 weeks later, Sheila stood in her old office, boxing up the last remnants of her former life. The senior partner appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "We'll match any offer," he said. Sheila sealed the box with tape, the sound sharp in the quiet space. "I'm opening my own practice, criminal defense." She met his eyes and smiled. "And I already have my first client." "Thank you for sticking around with me." My wonderful story family. Before you go, I'd love to ask you for a small favor. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me more than you can imagine and keeps these videos coming. The link is right below the video. Drop your location below. I want to know where my story family is watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it.